Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the last group of humans leave Earth forever. The big metal ships filled with families and children rose up through the clouds and disappeared into space. His heart felt heavy as he saw them go, but he knew this was the only way to save his people. The alien ships were coming, and there were too many to count. 12 different alien races had joined together to destroy humanity. They called themselves the Dominion Coalition, and they wanted Earth gone from the galaxy. The government had made a secret deal to get people out, but someone needed to stay behind and give them time to escape. Jake had said he would do it. His wife Lisa had begged him to come with her on the evacuation ships, but Jake could not leave. He was a soldier, and this was his job. The ship he commanded was called the UES Defiance, and it was the best warship humans had ever built. But even the best ship could not fight 10,000 enemy vessels alone. His crew of 200 men and women had served with him for 3 years. They were good people, and Jake did not want them to die for nothing. He walked through the ship and told each person they could leave if they wanted. Most of them chose to go, but 30 decided to stay with their captain. Jake felt proud of them, but also sad because he knew what would happen next. The alien commander sent him a message on the radio. The voice was strange and clicking like an insect. Jake could see the alien on his screen, and it looked like a giant bug with 4 arms and red eyes. The creature spoke in broken human language. "Human captain, you face death today. Your people run like scared animals, but you stay. Why do you throw your life away for nothing? Surrender now, and I will kill you quickly." Jake looked at the alien leader and felt no fear. He had made his choice, and he would not change his mind now. His voice was calm when he answered, "My name is Jake Morrison, and I am a human being. My people are not animals, and they are not scared. We fight for what we believe in. If you want this planet, you will have to take it from me." The alien made a sound like angry buzzing. "Then you will die human. All of you will die." Jake turned off the radio and looked at his crew. They were young and old, men and women from all over Earth. Some looked scared, but none of them left their posts. They knew what they had signed up for, and they were ready. The battle started when the alien ships entered Earth's space. Jake had prepared for this moment for months. He knew he could not win, but he could make them pay a heavy price. The orbital defense stations around Earth began firing their big guns at the enemy fleet. Bright lights filled the darkness of space as weapons met shields. Jake used every trick he knew to stay alive. He flew his ship through asteroid fields, where the big alien ships could not follow. He used the moon's gravity to swing around and attack from behind. He fired missiles and energy beams at any target he could find. The Defiance was fast and well armed, but it was still just one ship. The aliens had thousands of fighters and hundreds of big warships. Slowly, Jake watched as Earth's defenses fell one by one. The orbital stations exploded in balls of fire. The moon base went silent. Even the space elevators that connected Earth to orbit were destroyed, but Jake kept fighting. Every alien ship he destroyed was one less ship chasing the evacuation fleet. Every minute he stayed alive was another minute for his people to get away. His ship took damage from enemy fire, but the crew kept it running. They worked like one person with one mind. After 6 hours of fighting, Jake knew the end was coming. His ship was badly hurt, and most of Earth's defenses were gone. The alien fleet was now close enough to attack the planet itself. Jake could see fire starting on the surface as enemy bombs fell from the sky. He sent one last message to his wife on the evacuation ships. "Lisa, I love you, and I always will. Take care of our people and remember what we fought for. Do not let them forget Earth." The aliens surrounded his ship and demanded he surrender. Jake looked at his remaining crew and saw they were ready to fight to the end. He smiled at them and felt proud to serve with such brave people. "All hands prepare for ramming speed," he said into the ship's radio. "Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of." The Defiance turned toward the biggest alien ship and began to accelerate. Jake Morrison and his crew would not surrender, and they would not run away. They would fight until their last breath, because that is what humans do when their backs are against the wall. 6 months had passed since Earth burned and Jake Morrison was still alive. The aliens thought they had killed him when his ship crashed into their flagship, but Jake was harder to kill than they expected. He had escaped in the last few seconds, using an emergency pod, and now he lived in the dark spaces between the stars. The Defiance was gone, but Jake had found other ways to fight. He lived in old mining stations and empty cargo ships that drifted through space like ghosts. The aliens controlled all the main shipping routes, but they could not watch every piece of floating metal in the galaxy. Jake used this to his advantage. He had become something the aliens had never seen before. They called him the human ghost because he appeared without warning and disappeared just as fast. One day he would attack a supply convoy near Jupiter, and the next day he would blow up a fuel depot 3-star systems away. The aliens could not figure out how one man could be in so many places at once. Jake had learned to think like his enemy. He studied captured alien equipment and figured out how their technology worked. He took parts from destroyed ships and built new weapons that the aliens did not expect. His favorite trick was to use their own communication systems against them. He would listen to their radio messages and learn where they planned to attack. Next, the alien commander who hunted him was named Veltar, and he belonged to a race that looked like walking lizards. Veltar was smart and patient, but he could not understand how humans thought. Every trap he set for Jake failed because Jake did not follow the rules of normal warfare. Jake's biggest advantage was that he was alone. The aliens expected him to build an army or find allies, but Jake worked by himself. This made him impossible to predict. He could change his plans in seconds and go anywhere he wanted without telling anyone. The aliens spent months preparing for big battles that never happened while Jake hit them where they were weakest. During one of his raids on an alien supply base, Jake found something unexpected. Hidden in a storage room was a human woman who had been captured when her research ship was attacked. Her name was Amy Collins, and she was a scientist who studied alien life forms. She had been a prisoner for 8 months, but the aliens had kept her alive because they wanted to learn about human biology. Amy was thin and scared, but her mind was still sharp. She told Jake everything she had learned about the aliens while she was their prisoner. She knew which races were strong and which were weak. She understood how their bodies worked and what could hurt them. Most important of all, she knew that the alien alliance was not as strong as it seemed. "They are afraid of us, Jake," Amy said, as they escaped from the base in a stolen alien shuttle. "I heard them talking when they thought I could not understand their language. They destroyed Earth not because we were weak, but because they were scared of what we might become." This information changed everything for Jake. He began to see the war in a new way. The aliens had not attacked humanity because they were evil. They attacked because they feared that humans would one day challenge their power in the galaxy. This fear made them do terrible things, but it also made them weak. Jake and Amy worked together to create new weapons. She understood alien biology and he understood how to kill things. They made poisons that only worked on certain alien races. They built bombs that exploded when they detected alien DNA. They even created a virus that could shut down alien computer systems. But Jake's greatest weapon was not any device or poison. It was hope. Word began to spread through the galaxy that a human had survived Earth's destruction. Prisoners in alien camps whispered his name. Slaves on conquered worlds looked up at the stars and wondered if the human ghost would come to save them. The aliens tried to stop these stories, but they could not. Every time Jake attacked another base or destroyed another ship, the stories grew stronger. Some people said he was 10 feet tall and could not be killed by any weapon. Others said he could walk through walls and read minds. None of these things were true, but the truth did not matter. What mattered was that people believed. Jake knew that one man could not free the galaxy no matter how hard he fought. But one man could give others the courage to fight for themselves. Every successful mission he completed was a message to the oppressed peoples of the galaxy. The message was simple but powerful. The aliens could be beaten. Amy helped him send secret communications to human colonies that had been conquered. Most humans thought their race was extinct, but Jake proved they were wrong. He told them to be patient and wait for the right moment. He promised them that Earth would be avenged and humanity would return to claim its place among the stars. The aliens increased their efforts to capture or kill him. They offered huge rewards for information about his location. They built special ships designed just to hunt him down. They even started killing prisoners when he attacked their bases, hoping this would make him stop. But Jake did not stop. Every innocent person who died because of his actions made him more determined to win. He carried their deaths with him like weights on his soul, but he did not let the guilt stop him from fighting. He knew that if he gave up now, then everyone who had died would have died for nothing. The war was changing, and Jake could feel it. The aliens were getting desperate, and desperate enemies made mistakes. Soon he would have the chance to strike a blow that would shake the entire galaxy. Jake had been fighting alone for over a year when he learned about the Grand Assembly. Amy had intercepted alien communications while they hid in an abandoned space station near the edge of known space. The message was encrypted, but Amy was good with computers, and she broke the code after 3 days of work. The Grand Assembly was a meeting of all the alien leaders in the Dominion Coalition. They planned to gather on a fortress world called Drakmor Prime to discuss what they called the human problem. Jake smiled when he heard this because it meant his war was working. One man with a broken ship had become such a threat that 12 alien races needed to meet just to talk about him. Amy read him more details from the intercepted messages. The alien leaders were scared and angry. Some wanted to hunt Jake down with everything they had. Others wanted to make peace and tried to negotiate with the remaining human colonies. A few even suggested that maybe destroying Earth had been a mistake. They are falling apart, Jake, Amy said as she showed him the decoded messages on her computer screen. Half of them blame the other half for not catching you yet. Some of the smaller races are starting to ask why they joined this alliance in the first place. Jake studied the information carefully. The aliens had made their alliance through fear and intimidation. Many of the smaller races had joined only because they were afraid of being destroyed like humanity. But fear was a weak foundation for any partnership. If Jake could show these races that the coalition could be beaten, then maybe some of them would change sides. This gave Jake an idea that was so dangerous it scared even him. What if he could get to Drakmor Prime during the Grand Assembly? What if he could strike at all the alien leaders at once? It would be a suicide mission, but it might end the war in a single blow. First, he needed help, and he knew where to find it. Intelligence reports suggested that there were still human prisoners being held on various alien worlds. Many of these were soldiers who had been captured during the invasion of Earth. If Jake could free some of these people, then he would have allies who understood military tactics. The first rescue mission took place on a mining world called Kepler 7. The aliens used human prisoners as slave labor in the deep mines because humans were good at working in dangerous conditions. Jake and Amy spent 2 weeks watching the prison camp and learning the guards' routines. The attack happened during Sindu, the night shift when most of the alien guards were sleeping. Jake had built several small bombs from mining explosives he found in an abandoned warehouse. He used these to blow holes in the prison walls while Amy created a distraction by setting fire to the guards. Barracks. 23 human prisoners escaped that night, but only one of them was a soldier. His name was Ben Carter, and he had been a Marine lieutenant when Earth was attacked. Ben was thin and weak from months of hard labor, but his eyes still burned with the fire of a warrior who had not given up. "Captain Morrison," Ben said when Jake told him who he was, "every human in this prison thinks you are dead. They are going to be very happy to learn they were wrong." Jake looked at the other prisoners and saw teachers and farmers and shopkeepers. They were not soldiers, but they were human beings who had suffered under alien rule. Each one of them had family members who had died when Earth burned. Each one of them had reasons to fight. "I cannot promise you victory," Jake told them as they hid in caves outside the mining camp. "I cannot even promise you will live through tomorrow. But I can promise you the chance to strike back at the creatures who destroyed our world. Who wants to help me teach these aliens why they should fear humanity?" All 23 prisoners raised their hands. Over the next few months, Jake's small group grew larger. They rescued more prisoners from other worlds and recruited aliens who had grown tired of living under the Coalition's rule. Not all aliens supported the war against humanity. Some had tried to speak against it and been punished. Others had watched their own people suffer under Coalition rule and wanted revenge. Jake learned that the Coalition was not just an alliance of equals. The stronger races dominated the weaker ones and treated them almost like slaves. Many aliens had joined the Coalition because they were forced to, not because they wanted to. These unwilling allies could become Jake's greatest weapon. If he used them correctly, Ben Carter proved to be very valuable in organizing their growing resistance movement. He understood military planning, and he knew how to train civilians to fight like soldiers. More importantly, he understood something that Jake was starting to forget. He understood that this war was not just about revenge. It was about building something better after the fighting ended. "Jake, you are thinking like a warrior, but you need to think like a leader," Ben told him one night as they planned their next mission. "We are not just fighting to hurt our enemies. We are fighting to free everyone who has been oppressed by this coalition. That includes humans and aliens alike." Amy had been working on something she called the Truth Project. She had gathered evidence that showed how the coalition really worked. She had recordings of alien leaders admitting they had lied to their own people about the reasons for attacking Earth. She had documents that proved the coalition used fear and intimidation to control member races. "If we can broadcast this information during the Grand Assembly, then we can show the galaxy what these leaders really are," Amy explained. "Some of the member races might decide they do not want to be part of this alliance anymore." Jake knew that getting to Drakmor Prime would be almost impossible. The fortress world was protected by hundreds of warships and thousands of soldiers. But Amy's information gave him an idea. What if he did not have to fight his way in? What if he could get someone to invite him? The plan that formed in Jake's mind was complex and dangerous. It would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. It would also require him to trust aliens who claimed they wanted to help overthrow the coalition. Jake had learned not to trust anyone completely, but sometimes a soldier had to take risks too. When the war died, as he prepared for what might be his final mission, Jake recorded a message for his wife, Liza. He told her about everything that had happened since Earth's destruction. He told her about Amy and Ben and all the brave people who had joined their cause. Most importantly, he told her that humanity's spirit could not be broken no matter how hard their enemies tried. Jake Morrison had been fighting for almost 2 years, and the war was eating him alive from the inside. He barely slept anymore, and when he did sleep, he dreamed of burning cities and dying friends. His hands shook when he thought no one was looking. And he had started talking to himself during long hours alone on the bridge of whatever ship he happened to be using. Amy Collins watched him with growing worry. The man who had rescued her from alien captivity was disappearing and being replaced by something harder and colder. Jake still cared about saving humanity, but he seemed to care less and less about saving himself. He took risks that made no sense, and refused to listen when she or Ben Carter tried to talk him out of dangerous missions. The resistance movement had grown to include over 300 humans and almost 1,000 alien allies scattered across dozens of star systems. But Jake trusted fewer and fewer people as time went on. He kept important information to himself and made decisions without asking for advice. When Ben tried to suggest they needed better communication between their different groups, Jake just walked away. "He is becoming someone I do not recognize," Amy told Ben during one of their private conversations. "The Jake Morrison who saved me was angry, but he was still human. This person barely talks to us anymore unless it is to give orders." Ben nodded sadly. He had seen this happen to other soldiers during the war on Earth. Some men could fight for years and stay themselves. Others got lost in the violence and forgot who they used to be. Jake was becoming a weapon instead of a person, and weapons did not care about the cost of victory. The aliens had noticed the change in Jake too. Commander Veltar had studied every attack and raid that Jake had conducted. He was beginning to understand how the human mind worked under pressure. Veltar realized that Jake's growing isolation made him vulnerable in ways that a supported leader would not be. The trap was set on a colony world called Haven Prime, where the aliens had built a re-education center for human children. Jake had learned that over 200 young humans were being held there and forced to learn alien languages and customs. The idea of children being brainwashed made Jake angrier than anything else the aliens had done. Amy begged him to wait and plan the mission carefully. Ben offered to bring a full assault team to help with the rescue. But Jake was tired of waiting and tired of planning. He decided to go alone using a captured alien transport ship and forged identification codes. What Jake did not know was that the information about Haven Prime had come from a source that Veltar controlled. One of Jake's alien allies named Kethmer had been captured 3 weeks earlier and tortured until he agreed to help set a trap. Kethmer did not want to betray Jake, but the aliens had threatened to kill his entire family if he refused. Jake walked into the re-education center expecting to find sleeping guards and scared children. Instead, he found armed soldiers waiting for him in every hallway. The building was surrounded by hunter-killer ships, and there was no way to escape. For the first time since Earth's destruction, Jake Morrison was truly trapped. The firefight lasted for 6 hours. Jake used every trick he had learned during 2 years of guerrilla warfare. He moved through ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels. He used the children as motivation to keep fighting even when his situation seemed hopeless. But he was just one man against hundreds of enemies. In the end, Jake escaped because the alien soldiers made a mistake. They focused so much on capturing him alive that they forgot he might be willing to die to complete his mission. Jake detonated explosives he had planted throughout the building and used the chaos to fight his way to the children's dormitory. He managed to save 83 of the 200 children, but the cost was terrible. 17 kids died in the fighting, and Jake blamed himself for every death. When Amy and Ben found him 3 days later, he was sitting alone in the ruins of an abandoned space station holding a picture of his wife and crying. "I failed them, Amy," he said without looking up. "I was supposed to save those children and I got them killed instead. What kind of monster does that make me?" Amy knelt down beside him and took his hand. "You are not a monster, Jake. You are a man who has been fighting alone for too long. No one person can carry the weight of an entire war. You need to let us help you." But Jake pulled his hand away and stood up. "No. Every time I trust someone, people die. Every time I let someone else make decisions, innocent blood gets spilled. I started this war alone and I will finish it alone. Ben tried to reason with him. Jake, you cannot win this war by yourself. Even if you could, what would be the point if you lose your humanity in the process? Your wife would not recognize the person you are becoming. The mention of Lisa made Jake turn around with anger in his eyes. Do not talk to me about my wife. She is safe because I chose to stay behind and fight. Everything I have done has been to protect her and people like her. If that makes me a monster, then so be it. After that conversation, Jake began working completely alone. He still coordinated with the Resistance Network when he needed supplies or information, but he stopped including Amy and Ben in his planning. He moved from base to base without telling anyone where he was going. He became exactly what the aliens called him, a ghost. The isolation made Jake more dangerous but also more fragile. He started making small mistakes that a supported leader would not make. He began to rely too heavily on luck and too little on careful planning. Worst of all, he stopped caring whether he lived or died as long as he hurt the enemy. Amy and Ben tried to follow him and provide backup during his missions, but Jake was too good at hiding. They would arrive at a battle site hours after he had already left and find only destroyed alien ships and burning buildings. Sometimes they found messages he had left for them, but the messages were always the same. Stay away. This is not your fight. The war was changing Jake Morrison, but it was also changing the galaxy. His actions had inspired resistance movements on dozens of worlds. His legend had grown so large that some people thought he could not be killed by any weapon. The aliens were spending more and more resources trying to catch one man while their Raleigh empire slowly fell apart from within, but Jake could not see the bigger picture anymore. All he could see were the faces of people who had died because of choices he had made. All he could hear were the voices of children calling for help that never came. The weight of command had crushed something inside him, and he did not know how to get it back. Jake Morrison had been searching through captured alien data files for weeks when he found something that changed everything he thought he knew about the war. Hidden deep in the computer systems of a destroyed Coalition command ship was information that made his blood run cold. The aliens had not attacked humanity because they were evil or because they wanted Earth's resources. They had attacked because they were terrified of what humans might become. The files contained scientific reports about human genetics and psychology. Jake read document after document that described humans as a unique species in the galaxy. According to alien science, humans possessed something called genetic immunity that made them resistant to a form of mental control that worked on every other known intelligent species. Amy Collins had been right when she said the aliens feared humanity, but even she had not understood the full truth. The Dominion Coalition was not really an alliance of equal partners. It was a slave empire controlled by a small group of ancient beings called the Architects. These creatures used psychic technology to control the minds of entire species and force them to serve the Coalition's goals. Every member race of the Kedis Coalition was enslaved except for a few individuals who were strong enough to resist the mental control. These resistant individuals were used as commanders and administrators, but they lived in constant fear of losing their independence. The whole galaxy had been turned into a prison where only the guards knew they were trapped. Humans were immune to this control because of something in their brain chemistry that the aliens did not understand. If humanity had been allowed to grow and spread throughout the galaxy, they would eventually have discovered the truth about the Architects. They would have become a rallying point for every enslaved species that wanted freedom. So the Architects had ordered the destruction of Earth and the elimination of the human race. They told their slave species that humans were a threat to galactic peace and must be stopped before they could contaminate other worlds. Most of the Coalition races believed this lie because they had no choice. Their minds belonged to the architects. Jake sat alone in his hidden base and tried to process this information. Everything he had done for the past 2 years suddenly made sense in a new way. His war had not just been about revenge for Earth's destruction. It had been about freeing an entire galaxy from slavery. Every alien ship he destroyed weakened the Coalition's control. Every successful mission inspired other slaves to resist their masters. But the weight of this revelation also crushed him. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds were living as slaves and did not even know it. The Coalition races that had destroyed Earth were themselves victims of the same enemies that Jake was fighting. How many innocent aliens had he killed? While thinking they were his enemies, Amy found him 3 days later sitting in the dark staring at the data files. She had been searching for him ever since he disappeared from their last meeting point. When she saw the information on his computer screen, her face went white with shock. "Jake, this changes everything," she whispered as she read the documents. "If this is true, then the entire galaxy has been living a lie for thousands of years. These architects have turned every intelligent species into their personal army." Jake looked up at her with eyes that seemed older than his years. "I have been killing slaves, Amy. Every alien soldier I fought was just another prisoner forced to serve masters they could not see. I thought I was fighting for justice, but I was just creating more suffering." Amy knelt beside his chair and took his hands in hers. "No, Jake, you were fighting for freedom even if you did not know it. Every battle you won weakened the architects' control. Every ship you destroyed was one less tool they could use to oppress innocent people. You have been the galaxy's liberator from the beginning." But Jake shook his head. "It does not matter what I intended, Amy. What matters is what I did. How many good people died because I was too blind to see the truth? How many families were destroyed because I thought I was fighting a war instead of breaking chains?" Amy helped him understand that guilt would not change the past, but action could still change the future. The information they had discovered was the key to freeing the galaxy from the architects' control. If they could broadcast this evidence to every world in Coalition space, then the enslaved races would learn the truth about their situation. Jake realized that the Grand Assembly on Drakmor Prime was the perfect opportunity to expose the architects. All the Coalition leaders would be gathered in one place along with representatives from every member race. If Jake could infiltrate the meeting and broadcast the evidence, then he could break the mental chains that held the galaxy in slavery. Plan was suicide, but Jake no longer cared about his own survival. He had lost too many friends and seen too much suffering to worry about living through another battle. If his death could free billions of enslaved beings, then it would be a good trade. Amy and Ben Carter tried to talk him out of the mission, but Jake's mind was made up. He spent 2 weeks preparing for what he knew would be his final fight. He recorded messages for his wife Lisa and for the human colonies that had survived Earth's destruction. He wrote down everything he had learned about the architects and their methods of control. "Tell our people that Earth was not destroyed because we were weak," he said into the recording device. "Tell them we were destroyed because we were the one species in the galaxy that could not be enslaved. Tell them that makes us the most dangerous enemies the architects have ever faced." Jake also recorded a message for the alien resistance fighters who had joined his cause. He thanked them for their courage and told them that the fight for freedom would continue even after he was gone. He asked them to remember that the Coalition soldiers they fought were victims just like themselves. Ben Carter helped him plan the infiltration of Drakmor Prime. They would use the chaos of the Grand Assembly to slip past the fortress world's defenses. Jake would wear the uniform of a Coalition officer and carry forged identification that Amy had created. If everything went according to plan, he would reach the main assembly hall and broadcast the evidence about the architects to every world in the galaxy. "I wish there was another way," Ben said as they went over the plan one final time. "You have," Given everything to this war, Jake, you deserve to see the peace that comes after. Jake smiled sadly and clasped his friend's shoulder. I have already seen more than I ever expected to see, my friend. When this started, I thought I would die defending Earth. Instead, I got to fight for 2 years and learn that humanity's sacrifice meant something. That is enough for any soldier. The night before he left for Drakmor Prime, Jake sat alone and thought about his wife Lisa. He wondered if she would understand the choices he had made. He hoped she would forgive him for all the times he had chosen duty over love. Most of all, he hoped she would be proud of what he had tried to accomplish, even if he failed. Jake Morrison had started this war as a captain trying to save his crew. He would end it as a man trying to save the galaxy. Jake Morrison walked through the halls of Drakmor Prime wearing the uniform of a Coalition intelligence officer and carrying identification papers that said his name was Commander Zaktel of the Saurian Republic. Amy Collins had done excellent work creating the false identity, and no one questioned his presence at the Grand Assembly. To the alien guards, he was just another mid-level officer attending the most important meeting in Coalition history. The fortress world was exactly what Jake had expected. Massive stone buildings rose from dark rock under a red sky filled with patrol ships. Thousands of alien soldiers and officials moved through the streets preparing for the arrival of their leaders. Jake counted at least 50 different species, all working together to serve masters they did not know existed. The main assembly hall was a huge, circular building at the center of the fortress city. Jake had studied the building plans that Amy had stolen from Coalition databases. He knew every entrance and exit. He knew where the broadcasting equipment was located. Most importantly, he knew where the architects would be sitting when the assembly began. Jake had never seen an architect before, but he knew what to look for from the captured data files. They were ancient beings that looked somewhat like humans, but with pale skin and large dark eyes. They used advanced technology to project false appearances so they could move among their slave species without being recognized. But Jake's human immunity to psychic control meant he could see through their disguises. The assembly began at noon with representatives from all 12 Coalition races taking their seats in the Great Hall. Jake found a position near the broadcasting controls, where he could watch the proceedings without drawing attention to himself. He waited as various alien officials gave speeches about the ongoing war against human resistance forces. Then Jake saw them. 3 beings sitting in special seats reserved for Coalition advisors. To everyone else in the room, they probably looked like normal members of their respective species. But Jake could see their true forms. The architects were exactly as the stolen files had described them. Ancient pale creatures with eyes like black holes and fingers that moved like spider legs. One of the architects stood up to address the assembly. When it spoke, its voice was like ice water flowing over broken glass. Jake felt his skin crawl as he listened to the creature explain why the war against humanity must continue until every last human was dead. The humans carry a genetic flaw that makes them dangerous to galactic peace, the architect said in perfect Coalition standard language. They cannot be integrated into our society like other species. They cannot be reasoned with or controlled. They must be eliminated completely, or they will contaminate other races with their destructive independence. Jake almost laughed at the irony. The creature was telling the truth about human independence, but describing it as a disease instead of a gift. Humans could not be controlled because they were free. The architects feared this freedom because it threatened their slave empire. The assembly continued for 2 hours with various Coalition leaders discussing strategy and resources. Jake listened as they talked about his resistance movement and debated the best methods for hunting down the remaining human survivors. Some suggested using captured humans as bait to lure Jake into traps. Others wanted to simply destroy every world where humans might be hiding. Finally, Jake decided it was time to act. He moved quietly to the broadcasting controls and began uploading Amy's evidence files to the Coalition communication network. The process would take several minutes, and he needed to stay hidden until it was complete. He crouched behind a bank of computers and waited as the upload progress bar slowly filled. But Jake had been discovered. Commander Veltar, the Saurian hunter, who had been chasing him for 2 years, stepped out from behind a pillar with a dozen Coalition soldiers. The alien's reptilian face showed something that might have been respect mixed with satisfaction. "Human," Ghost Veltar said quietly so as not to disturb the assembly. "I knew you would come here eventually. Your species cannot resist the urge to fight impossible battles. It is both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness." Jake stood up slowly with his hands empty and visible. The upload was at 90% completion, and he needed to buy just a little more time. "Commander Veltar, I presume. I have heard good things about your hunting skills. Tell me, do you know what your masters really are?" Veltar's eyes flickered with confusion. "My masters are the elected leaders of the Coalition. I serve them willingly because our alliance brings peace to the galaxy." "Look at them, Veltar," Jake said, pointing toward the 3 architects. "Really look at them. Use whatever senses your species has evolved. Tell me what you see." The Saurian commander turned toward the advisor seats, and Jake saw his expression change. For just a moment, Veltar's mental conditioning wavered, and he saw the architects as they truly were. The shock of recognition almost dropped him to his knees. "Impossible," Veltar whispered. "The Thought Masters died out thousands of years ago. The Coalition was formed to ensure they could never return." "The Coalition was formed by them," Jake replied as the upload reached 100%. "Every species in this room except humans has been their slave for millennia, but that ends today." Jake activated the broadcast system, and Amy's evidence began flowing to every world in Coalition space. The data included recorded conversations between architects discussing their control methods. It included scientific analyses of the psychic technology they used to enslave other species. Most damning of all, it included historical records showing that the Coalition had been under architect control since its formation. The reaction in the assembly hall was immediate and chaotic. As the evidence played on every screen and speaker system, representatives from dozens of species began to understand the truth about their situation. Some cried out in horror as they realized they had been living as slaves. Others became violently angry at the lies they had been told. The 3 architects tried to maintain control, but their psychic influence was breaking down as more and more beings learned to resist. Jake watched with satisfaction as Coalition soldiers turned their weapons on their former masters. The slave empire was collapsing from within just as he had hoped, but the architects were not defenseless. The largest of the 3 creatures began to glow with an evil energy that hurt Jake's eyes to look at. The being was preparing to use some kind of psychic weapon that would kill everyone in the hall rather than lose control of its empire. Jake did not hesitate. He ran toward the creature, knowing that his human immunity made him the only person who could get close enough to stop it. Coalition soldiers tried to shoot him, but their aim was wild in the chaos. Jake felt energy bolts sear past his head as he closed the distance to his target. The architect turned its terrible gaze on Jake, and he felt a crushing pressure inside his skull. The creature was trying to tear his mind apart, but human brain chemistry protected him from the worst of the attack. Jake reached the architect's platform and tackled the ancient being just as it was about to unleash its weapon. The explosion that followed destroyed the entire assembly hall and most of the surrounding city. The architect's psychic weapon had been turned inward by Jake's interference, and the feedback killed all 3 of the ancient creatures instantly. Jake Morrison died in that explosion, but his sacrifice freed billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. In the days that followed, the revelation spread to every world in Coalition space. Species after species threw off their mental chains and declared independence from the slave empire. The Coalition military collapsed as soldiers refused to fight for masters they now knew were their enemies. Worlds that had been allies for thousands of years suddenly remembered they had been forced into service against their will. Humanity emerged from hiding to find a galaxy transformed. The species that had once sought to destroy them now looked to humans as liberators and leaders. Jake Morrison became a legend not just among his own people, but among every free being in the galaxy. His name was spoken with reverence on 1,000 worlds. Amy Collins and Ben Carter survived the war and helped establish the Galactic Liberation Council with Earth as its symbolic capital. The new government was built on Jake's principles of freedom and self-determination. No species would ever again be forced to serve masters against their will. Lisa Morrison lived to see her husband's dream realized. She watched as humans and aliens worked together to build a better galaxy based on cooperation instead of domination. Jake had given his life to ensure that no being would ever face the darkness of slavery again. The war was over and humanity had won not through superior weapons or tactics, but through the simple refusal to surrender their freedom. Jake Morrison had faced the galaxy alone, and in doing so had taught every enslaved species that they too could choose to be free.